Virgo 4, a black child playing with white children. The teaching here is about freedom from prejudice. Now, it's a bit simplistic to say that racial prejudice is foolish and there's nobody on a spiritual path likely to be racially prejudiced. It's just too simplistic a teaching. There's more to this than meets the eye. But while we're on the topic of racial prejudice, we're all one. We're all children of God. Being racially prejudiced, attacking somebody because of their race or their religion or anything else, it's like the right hand attacking and giving pain to the left hand. It's just silly. And we probably, as spiritual seekers, have long ago dealt with our racial prejudice. I remember being brought up as a child, trained in racial prejudice, and I had to learn to let go of it. But there's plenty of conversations and teachings about that nowadays. I think we've probably given that up. But what about the other prejudices we have? The secret ones, the unconscious ones that we don't really admit to ourselves. And I spent a lot of time in what's generally called the New Age, a very ill-defined bunch of people that believe in lots of things, including astrology and reincarnation and goodness and harmony and so on. Well, what is goodness? You know, who could say what goodness is? If something is good for its purpose, which was the original philosophical definition of the word in Greek times, if a tool does a job, then it is good for the purpose. That's what the meaning is. But now we've turned it into a moral question. Somebody is good if they are kind and loving and so on. And they're bad if they're not. And bad people are not as important in the eyes of God. It's just silly. It's wrong. God doesn't differentiate between good and bad in terms of how much love. It's like the sun comes and shines on everyone, and the rain equally waters every garden, whether or not it's a good garden or a bad garden or a good person or a bad person. What comes from that highest source comes universally, without any determination about good and bad. And there is no need for us to make that judgment either. Now, this is what the Sabian Symbol is teaching. There is no need for us to make judgments about people at all, most particularly in advance of actually collecting the evidence about them. Certain people talk against astrology. As an astrologer, so often in my life I've had people very rudely indeed tell me that astrology is nonsense, it cannot be meaningful. And yet celebrities do the same thing. Stephen Fry's the latest. This is nonsense. Like, upon what research have you based that opinion? You know, how many books have you read? How many intelligent, wise discussions have you had on the subject? What do you think an astrologer does? Oh, you cannot predict the future. Well, first, astrologers, some of them predict the future, some prefer not to. I'm one of the latter. And anyway, you can predict the future. You can't predict all of it, but you can predict some of it. If you plant a pear tree, if you plant a pear seed, you're not going to get an apple tree. That's predicting the future. The sun's going to come up tomorrow. That's predicting the future. And more subtle cycles of life can be predicted by astrology. So anyone who comes to a subject like astrology, or it could be something else, a political belief or a social requirement, anybody who comes at these things knowing that that's the truth and somebody who disagrees is wrong, that's a prejudiced person. So do you think that good is better than bad? You know? Do you think that in God's eyes, Hitler is the worst case scenario and Mother Teresa is somebody to reward? If you do, then I think you need to look to see where you get that from. Why are you prejudiced in favor of a saint and against a mass murderer? Well, I mean, it seems such a silly question. Of course you are. But let's look deeper than that. These people are receiving our projections. They're like Judas in the Bible. Is Judas the root of all evil? You know, or is Judas a necessary part of establishing Christ in his story? And took on a greater burden because he was blamed forever subsequent to that. It's too subtle for us to know. What we do know is that in the moment, life is real. Here and now. Sensory experience, spontaneous action, and so on. If we consider the past, it's dead. If we consider the future, it's fantasy. Here and now, that's all there is. So prejudice moves us out of the here and now into a locked position. Now, that locked position is the enemy of spirit. Spirit cannot do very much with that. Any certainty, any prejudged position that you may hold on any matter at all, whether it's black and white children or good and bad behavior, if you have any opinion about what's the thing that is good for you in advance of the moment, that's not the highest level of spiritual teaching that you could follow. So I think that's what Virgo 4 is mainly about, just warning us not to get too caught up in an attitude. Because as soon as you've crystallized yourself into something, then you're closed to being something more, something different, something alive. You're closing yourself off. You're dying by doing that. Don't crystallize yourself into anything, any behavior, any thought, any feeling response, anything at all. Don't stop from being willing to change. Life is change. Life is change. And prejudgment about that is always false. Always.